Hi everyone, welcome. I know a few of us are still trickling in here. Today we'd like to welcome our guests to campus and our students and fated employees to what will hopefully be the first Interfaith Panel we host here at school. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kayla Cochran and I teach in the history department here at Fayden. We're thrilled to welcome our panelists today, many of whom are respected religious leaders in our local community. Today, we are here to share reflections on the role that faith plays in our community and in our individual lives. And these are conversations that many of you have asked for, and so we hope that today might spark a seed for further dialogue. As a note, we've done our best to compile a diverse panel of folks, but we can't represent every perspective here. And actually, unfortunately, one of our panelists was not able to be here today, so we're down one for the count. Even if each panelist had 5 minutes to talk, we would be halfway through our time here today. So as we begin to consider today's conversation, just a seed for discussion, I'll invite you to think through the following framing of windows and mirrors. So when you hear our panelists talk, you might think, how are these perspectives a window into experiences very different than my own? And how might these perspectives be a mirror to help me see my own experiences more clearly? Oh, do we have, yay, come on up. We're all here. Okay, awesome. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and get us started by just inviting each of our panelists very briefly to introduce themselves, their religious affiliations, and the role they play in our community.
Hi, I'm Rabbi Jacob Adler. You can call me Rabbi Jacob. I'm Jewish. I'm the rabbi of Minyan on the Hill, which is a traditional Jewish prayer group in Fayetteville.
Hi, I'm Anand Shankaran. You can call me Anand or Anand, whichever way. It means bliss in Sanskrit, in my language. I'm the president of the Hindu Temple and the Hindu Association of Northwest Arkansas. I'm here to listen. I'm also excited to see all of you. Thank you.
Can you hear me? I'm Paul Van Sloten. Good to be with you. I am my role as the stake president would be the equivalent of a regional leader or a senior pastor of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Many of you have watched our temple being built along the freeway, and we're really excited about that. But it's so great to be with you.
My name is Bethany Davis, and I am a leader in SGI, which is Soka Gakkai International. It's a Nichiren Buddhist organization here in Northwest Arkansas. I am a leader for women and non-binary meetings within our district.
Hi, I'm Misha Blaze. I'm here as part of the Baha'i community. We don't have clergy, so I'm just a person. We do have an administrative order, though, where we elect bodies of administrators at the local, national, and international level, and then from the international level, they appoint people to help organize the community. So I have been appointed for the state of Arkansas and Oklahoma, but I'm really just a person.
Good morning, everyone. I'm just a person as well. So my name is Faizullah. I go by Fez. I am professionally I'm a data scientist working for Cigna, and I'm representing the Bentonville Islamic Center located on 2nd Street. If many of you are familiar with that Native American museum over there, we're right across the street from there. Obviously, I'm here representing the Muslim faith. I'm an assistant imam at the mosque unofficially, and our full-time imam is actually out of town. He's visiting family in Jordan, so I'm here representing the community. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Don Morrow. I'm the senior minister of First Christian Church in Waterway here in Bentonville. I'm also a person. And our sites, you may recognize our First Christian Church site is just across the street from the police department on 14th Street, and Waterway is kind of towards Cave Springs on Highway 112.
Thank you all. I'd like to start our panel today by inviting you all to share a little bit about your journey through faith and perhaps how it's evolved. So there is lots of diversity within religions in terms of how members define their connections to their faith identities. For some, beliefs and rituals of worship are central to our lives. For others, it's a community and a culture that we are drawn to. Many feel that they have been born and raised in a particular religion and are unable to, or perhaps don't want to change it. Others feel like they can explore and have picked up religion later in life. So could you talk us through what might your journey have looked like to get you to the place you are today? And anyone is welcome to start whenever you feel called to speak.
Where do people in the background, all of us? I think. So I come from a long line of people that practice Buddhism. I think growing up in a religion might be the same for everybody. Like, you do it because it's what you do and it's what you know. And so when I was younger, I would, we do a chant or a prayer, a mantra, and it's Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. And so I would do this chant or prayer when things were bad. Like if I needed something or something was going wrong, it was just kind of my go-to and what I knew. When I was in my 20s, I was 26 years old, my brother actually overdosed and was in a coma. And I was chanting so hard, like through just the power of my voice, I was going to change his situation. And as I was doing that, I thought, what if I did this not when things were bad, and I did it before that? Like, how much better would my life be in between those times, and how much better would I get through those experiences that brought me so low? And so after that day, I just decided I was going to commit myself to making this practice part of my daily life, and going to local meetings here in Northwest Arkansas, and that's really when I decided to take this faith for myself.
I can go. So I was born into Hinduism. My family was Hindus, but for several decades, 3+ decades, I didn't have a connection, right? I didn't go to the temple. I was not practicing anything. One fine day, it was the birth of one of our gods, Rama. You probably heard of him. The priest talked about him as, like he said, if you want to treat him as God, that's great. You'll get something out of that. But if you treat him as a fellow human being who rose by his good deeds and, to the godly status, I think you'll learn a lot from his life. That, ignited a spark in me. And since then, I've been on this path to self-discovery. We believe in Hinduism, which is just a way of life, that you be the best version of yourself. I think you'll add a lot to society. And so all religion, I believe, is basically a discovery of yourself, right? Your understanding of yourself, you learn why you are here and what are you supposed to do. So that was how my journey started. And I'm so happy that I'm amongst people who are also in discovery mode, I assume, from different paths. And I'm here to listen as much as to share. So thank you.
I grew up in church, actually in the same denomination that I'm now a pastor in. But about the time I hit high school, and certainly my latter years in high school, I started having real doubts about faith and about God altogether. Stayed in church because I had a lot of good friends there. My youth group was a really important part of my life. But when I went to college, I really identified more as agnostic, even atheist. Had an experience with a homeless man on the streets in Austin, Texas, where I was in college. My senior year in college, spent about 3 hours with him, and in the midst of that, just began thinking about life being about more than just me, and feeling a connection to this person I'd never met before, and that started me back on a path to faith. And about 2 years after that, I was in seminary.
My story is kind of similar. I was raised in a Jewish family, Jewish parents. I went to religious school, had a bar mitzvah, and in my first year in college, I stopped being a believer, but I stayed culturally Jewish. Judaism is not just a religion, it's a culture, it's a collection of different ethnic groups, it's a community of practice. And I remained an agnostic till I came here to teach at the University of Arkansas. I used to go to the synagogue because I wanted to hang out with some Jewish people. And 1 month, the rabbi couldn't come down. He used to come once a month from Missouri. And there were a number of people who could lead the prayers, but I was the only one who could read from the scroll. The scroll has no vowels and no punctuation, and so it's pretty hard to read unless you are trained. And I felt, well, I shouldn't read because I don't believe in it, but I should read because the people shouldn't be deprived of a reading from the Holy Book. And I went back and forth, and finally I decided I had to do it. And afterwards, it felt as if God was pointing a finger at me and saying, now we'll see what kind of agnostic you are. And that was a big transformation point.
I can jump in. So I love the question about being a faith journey that signifies a beginning and an end and a lot in between. And that's been my faith journey. I grew up in a very gospel-centered home. And probably the most pivotal element of my faith journey was when I was just about your age. I was thinking about serving a mission. Many of you know that our members of our church serve full-time missions. You see them with white shirts and ties and the badges, or the sister missionaries with the dresses and badges. And this was a really, really important defining chapter for me in making that decision, because that was a 2-year commitment, and I wasn't going to go unless I had a real strong conviction of my doctrine and beliefs. And so I put a lot of study and prayer into it, and I received some great spiritual guidance, and that was really what I needed to receive the answers from God to say, this is the path forward. And so I submitted an application. I got a call to serve in Taiwan, speaking Chinese, and of course I had no background whatsoever with the Chinese language, but that was an incredible defining chapter of my life. Those 2 years, it was a time where you kind of, back then we didn't have cell phones, but whatever the equivalent of cell phones were, video games and all the things we gave up, I gave up so many things to go focus on serving others. And when you look outside yourself and you focus on others and not yourself, it has a transforming effect that is lasting. And that was the experience that I had as a missionary. I came back and then continued to grow and learn and study. It's helped, that experience also helped me in my career. I've had 31 years now with PepsiCo, so I don't want any Coke products in the room, please. But that missionary experience really taught me so many defining qualities that have helped me throughout my life.
All right, so my faith journey was all over the United States. I was born in India. I moved to the States when I was 2 years old, and since then I've lived in 16 or 17 states now. I've lost count at this point. But I've moved around quite a bit throughout the United States, and so one thing that many of you guys know, when you move around, especially from different schools, you have to make a lot of new friends. And with friends comes a lot of questions. And they want to know everything about you, where you're from, what do you do, what do your parents do, sometimes even what you believe in. And so growing up, I grew up Muslim, of course. My parents were very religious. They took me to the mosque with them. But like many other people in this room, I'm sure can relate, you just kind of do what your parents kind of, they take you to church, you go to church with them, they want you to do something, you do it with them. But as we get older, throughout that middle school, early high school phase, you start asking yourself a lot of questions, especially when questions are being asked to you. And so I had a lot of questions about my faith. Why am I believing in Islam? What about it really appeals to me? And many of you guys know in the media, maybe not nowadays as much, but definitely 5-10 years ago, there was a lot of light on Muslims and Islam, what we believe in, what we don't believe in. A lot of misinformation, a lot of miscommunication. I had doubts about my faith. I had questions. And so I really took an introspective look, and I told myself that, look, if I'm going to believe in this, I want to believe in it. Whatever I believe in, I can't have beyond a shadow of a doubt of what I believe in. And so I took a couple of years. I actually learned Arabic, and I learned the Quran. I went to seminary school. I took a gap year from my undergraduate degree at the University of Arkansas. I actually was in Dr. Adler's class, Intro to Philosophy. So that was a really great class, and I'm pretty sure I got a D. But I think it was a B actually. But he bumped me up. He's a great professor.
I don't have my grade book with me.
And so, after studying Arabic and Islamic history, I came to the conclusion that, all the answers that I'm looking for, that I needed in a faith to believe in, I was able to find. Lack of inconsistency is something that was consistent and coherent. I was able to find all of those answers. And so that's what I always like to share whenever I go with students is, regardless of what your faith is, I always just share, ask questions. That's the most important thing.
Well, I was raised secular, but I was always super curious. I just felt like there's something bigger going on, and I just had big questions about life. And I had a Baha'i friend in junior high, and she actually just told me some basic stuff about the Baha'i faith, and one thing she told me was this idea of progressive revelation, because I'd only been around Christian culture and maybe a certain vein of Christianity where there's a belief that if you're not Christian you go to hell, or you're a sinner, you're saved kind of thing. And it was a bad representation, but that's what I was exposed to. And she taught me this concept in the Baha'i faith of progressive revelation, which is the idea that God sends these great teachers to communicate with humanity, including Buddha, Krishna, Moses, Christ, Muhammad. They're all different lamps that are bringing forth the same light. And their spiritual teachings are essentially the same, but they have different social teachings based on where they came, where they revealed themselves, and what time of history. And that the prophet of the Baha'i faith, his name's Baha'u'llah, his teachings are all about the unity of humanity, and that's really the era we're living in, is all about we're thrown together as a global civilization suddenly, and how can we really become one humanity, understand ourselves as one human family that's sharing one planetary homeland. And so in college, I was just exploring all sorts of different faith traditions, and I started studying religion in school because I just had these spiritual hunger, and I wanted my questions answered. And I ended up going on a study abroad program, and it was based around globalization and how things are playing out in this global era. And on that trip, we went to 5 different countries, and we visited sweatshops, we visited farms, we learned just so many things that are falling apart in the world, and also so many things are coming together. And then I learned the Baha'i concept of disintegration and integration, which is the idea that there's old frameworks of how to get along in the world that are all falling apart around us, and it's creating a ton of chaos. And we see old institutions and old frameworks of mind falling apart, but at the same time there's a new cohesion coming forward. We can all see this happening around us in every phase of life, like in our individual life, in our families, in our communities, and that this is all part of the spiritual trajectory of humanity to come together as one, and that all religions are good and are part of this, this oneness of humanity. Oh, and so then I was like, yeah, I really love that. That's right, and I ended up becoming Baha'i.
Thank you all. I think one thing that really strikes me about all of your stories is just how relational they are, discovering faith and relearning faith in community. Like Nisha, I discovered the Baha'i faith in New Jersey. I was raised Catholic. I went to a Jesuit college, and I had a neighbor in her 70s who was a refugee from Iran who invited me into her house for tea. We still Zoom every week, and we talk and we pray and we think about life, and that relationship really opened up my faith, which I had felt like the door was closed on. And so I heard that from a lot of you, that you were in a situation, you were talking to someone in a classroom, and I think in those relational spaces, right, and a school is a relational space and a relational community, religious diversity can be such a rich addition. So I'm wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about how we can best celebrate and respect diversity of faith traditions inside of these relational communities that really depend on trust and respect and kindness.
Well, there's a story from the Jewish tradition from the early 19th century. There was some students of a rabbi, the rabbi of Drohobych in Eastern Europe, and the rabbi of Drohobych died, and so they were looking for a new teacher, and they went to a rabbi who was called the seer of Lublin, and Lublin in Poland, if some of you know your geography. And they arrived on Saturday night when he was performing the ritual of the greeting of the new moon. And they noticed that he did it differently than their old teacher had done it. And they thought, well, this is not right, we're not going to follow this teacher. But they didn't say anything to him, but they just made ready to leave. And as they were preparing to leave, he said to them, a God who had only one way of serving him, what a poor excuse for a God that would be. And so I think the variety of religions is a sign of the greatness of God. You know, that a God who could be served in one way would be a little God, and a God who is served in all these many different ways is a great God.
I think, I came here to listen more than speak. So I'm excited to learn about different perspectives. What I thought I'd share about diversity is the Hindu faith is pretty localized in the Indian subcontinent, and now it's global, but a lot of the festivals are either solar calendar based or lunar calendar based, and you may know a couple of them. There is a Festival of Lights coming up. It will be celebrated the momentary on April 8th. We're still figuring out how to organize it. Festival of Colors, Holi. But a lot of these festivals celebrate the victory of good over evil, the celebration of the calendars, like the seasons changing. It all originated with scientific beliefs, and it gets celebrated in the culture. It gets merged in the culture. The Festival of Lights called Deepavali happens sometime in October and November. It's also the victory of good over evil, light over darkness, and knowledge over darkness, if you will. So those are festivals which celebrates a higher spirit, but it also is a lot of fun, a lot of good food. So if you guys get a chance to celebrate one of those festivals, please come and immerse yourself in it. A lot of the world's festivals speak the same language and celebrates humanity, right? So that's what I would like to share.
I love that we're here to celebrate religious diversity. I think it's fabulous. This says so much about this institution. And it stems from the freedom of religion that our forefathers fought so hard for. And it is something that we should celebrate and appreciate. There's just so much good that comes from each religion. One of the tenets of our faith, we have the 13 articles of faith that basically summarize our core beliefs. One of them is, and I'm getting a business call, I apologize. Pepsi can wait. One of our core beliefs is that we claim the privilege of worshiping Almighty God according to the dictates of our own conscience, and allow all men and women the same privilege to do so. Let them worship how, where, or what they may. It's so important, we believe, that all people are given the opportunity to worship how, where, or what they may. And not only that, we believe that God will give spiritual guidance to all of His children. We believe that we're all the children of God, that He's our Heavenly Father. We're all brothers and sisters. And that truly that spiritual guidance is for all people, not just of one religion or another. That those who seek with pure intent to God, and you have come with questions in a sincere heart, He will provide you guidance and answers. I've felt that in my own life, and I know many others have felt that, and I've heard similar stories here in this panel, which is absolutely beautiful. As it relates to traditions, I'll share some of the traditions of our faith. Some of you might recognize these about our church. We're known not to drink or smoke. We're known not to have premarital sex. We're known to ride around on bikes with white shirts and ties on missions like I did in Taiwan for 2 years. We're known for family relations. We dedicate one night each week for family home evening. Family is really important. We're known to serve in the community. Those are all traditions, and there's so many traditions of various faiths, but each of these traditions make us better as a community, make our communities better, and I wholeheartedly subscribe to the rich traditions that each faith and religion brings.
I think within Buddhism, there's this idea of dependent origination, which means I am not independent in my life from anybody else around me. You can't take the fish out of water, so what happens to the fish impacts the water, what happens to the water impacts the fish. And so we're all in this together. We're all on the same planet together, we're all in the same city together, we're all in the same room together, and so we all impact each other because of that. But then on the other side, there's also this story of cherry, plum, peach, and damson. And there are all these like beautiful flowering fruit trees in Japan. But you can't ask a cherry to be a peach, and you can't ask a peach to be a cherry. They would be miserable if you tried. So there's also this idea of illuminating and manifesting your true self. So we can all individually work on what makes us better, like work on taking this one step forward every day, while at the same time giving that same respect to those around us. And so because we're all dependently connected, we can't be happy based on someone else's, based on a pain of somebody else. So when we really work to respect those around us, you truly have that feeling that I am because you are kind of feeling in the world. Everything that you do in your life becomes an act of faith. So we say faith equals daily life. So how you live your life becomes this example of your faith. And so I think when it comes to sharing and discussing, like just having conversations, asking questions, and really listening is a big piece of our faith practice. We do discussion meetings every week where it's like we'll study a piece of writing and then say like, what does this mean to you, and what does this mean to me, and how am I going to take this forward in my life? And so, you know, there's all of these different practices, but they're all based on the same thing. And so I think the more we can share those, the better and more comfortable people become with that. And really, truly just respecting each other for that and listening. I saw on the wall of the refrigerator in the front office, it said, listen, 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 then speak. And that is something that I have learned. I have family members who don't have the same religion as me, my father as an example. Him and I have the same religion, vastly different political ideas. We were having an incredibly intense discussion, and afterwards my husband, who's Christian, said, "You're not listening to him to actually listen." And that was such a huge call out for me. I'm like, are you listening to listen to someone? Or are you listening to truly understand? Are you listening to tell them your opinion? Are you listening to truly get where they're coming from? And so that's a big piece of the Buddhist religion and what we practice. And I think the more we can do that, the more we can change and continue that. But it's such a beautiful thing to have everybody up here and all of you listening together today. Like that's a microcosm of what we want to happen in the whole world. So I think that's hugely important.
I love everything you just said. That's awesome. Yeah, I think we're talking about like the oneness and finding unity with religions, right? Yeah, I think it's just incredible to think how much humanity's changed even in the past 200 years. Like 200 years ago, people were much more isolated from each other. I think 90% of the world lived in rural areas, whereas now 50% or more live in cities and many more in mega cities that have 30 million people. So we're just like, we're flung together now, and very suddenly, over such a short amount of time, and humans have been around 200,000 years. You think just the past 200 years, we've come to this point where we really can see ourselves as one planet, one people living on one planet. And we understand that. We understand that through science, and we can understand the, the psychological and spiritual aspects of that as well. And this teaching in the Baha'i faith is that humanity, we need to recognize ourselves as different cells in one body. And if one part of the body is sick or ailing, it hurts the whole body. And so this is kind of, it's easy to look out in the world and see like, oh, there's these different problems, but it's because humanity develops progressively. So there's this idea of having faith in this trajectory that we're moving towards higher and higher levels, higher and higher degrees of unity and understanding ourselves as, as one body, where we have to take care of all the different parts of the body. And so as far as, different faith traditions, or even like not having a faith tradition, I think that's almost that's an ability to just be curious about other people and respect where they're coming from and what's your story. Like I feel such appreciation hearing people's different faith stories. I don't feel a sense of like we need to cast each other out or be different, blame each other for this or that. It's more of, I think in this age of humanity's maturity, we can greet each other with more of a curiosity and find out how can we work together despite our different backgrounds or different beliefs. So.
Thank you. I share a lot of the same sentiments and thoughts that my fellow panelists have shared up here. We've been talking about religious diversity and inclusion of other religions. Just the fact that we're all sitting up here together is a great representation of that. And like you were saying just a couple seconds ago, in the past 200 years, like the globalization of the world, religions and people are more connected now than ever before. But I want to try to share just two brief things with you guys, because I know we're running short on time.
We got some time.
We got some time? Okay, awesome. And so this religious tolerance and diversity really stems from a couple key principles, and I wanted to share some of those that are taught in our religion as well. And these are what grounds a lot of Muslims and what they believe in and how we tolerate other people. Many of you have probably heard of the Prophet Muhammad, and so he was preaching Islam for about 21 years, and during his last year, he gave a sermon called the farewell sermon. And in that, it was a very short sermon. He was addressing every Muslim that was there at that time, and he was basically giving them a message that, hey, as Islam starts to, more people learn about our faith, what are the key principles? And one of the main things that he shared during that sermon was, all of humankind, we come from Adam and Eve, and because Islam was predominantly Arab at that time, he says no Arab is superior over someone who's not an Arab. No white is superior over a black, no black is superior over a white. The only thing that promotes superiority is your character and good ethic. And so at the heart of all of our religions and cultures, I think all of us really believe and we share in those things. And so that's what a lot of Muslims, even like the earliest Muslims until this day, were very sensitive to these ideas of promoting, this social justice and equality, where Islam even preaches that you're not allowed to kill an ant without purpose. You can't cut down trees just because, I can't pluck a flower just because I want to, unless it's pretty. But I can't, I can't, kids always go take out a sword. Oh, I got this new sword. Let me try with the sword, and you start cutting down things. There's a very high level of sensitivity that we have to life, to people, and to the nature that's around us. And then I'll end with one last story that really exemplifies a lot of these characters. There was a war or a battle that happened, and so after this battle, there was a man by the name of Ali, and he found his shield. And so he was walking away with this shield, and he runs into a Jewish man. So Ali is a Muslim, and he runs into a Jewish man. The Jewish man recognizes the shield. He says, hey, that was actually my shield. I lost it in battle a couple of days ago. Can you return it to me? And Ali says, well, no, finders keepers, right? I got the booty of the war. I'm going to keep this. And so they kind of get into it. They say, okay, you know what? We have to go to the judge. Let's see what the judge is going to say, and we'll let him figure it out. We don't want to fight amongst ourselves. So they go to the judge. The judge, his name is Omar. And Omar and Ali, they're both Muslim. They go way back. They're like longtime buddies, longtime friends. And so they go to the judge. And so the judge, Omar, he says, okay, he calls Ali by a nickname because they're really good friends. And he says, oh, Abu Omar, tell me your story. Tell me about this shield, what happened? He says, well, I was there, I found the shield, I picked it up, it's mine now. He says, okay, thank you for sharing your case, let me go to the Jewish man. He goes to the Jewish man, he says, oh, Jewish man, tell me your story. And before he can even start sharing his story, Ali, the Muslim man, the one who found the shield, he stops the judge, he says, hold up, that's not fair. You're the judge, you're supposed to be fair, you called me by a nickname, you didn't call this man by a nickname, that's not justice. You know what, he can have the shield. This is not a fair judge. I'm out. Right? And so that's the level of sensitivity. These are the stories that Muslims were taught when we're growing up and we're going to the mosque. So this is the level of sensitivity we have to have of tolerating other religions and the sensitivity we have to social justice in society. And so I think that really promotes and that really exemplifies a lot of the other teachings within our faith.
Amen to all of that. I'll just kind of close with a statement that's part of my faith tradition. It's not unique to my faith tradition. There's other Christian denominations I know that claim this. But this was on the wall on a plaque when I was growing up. It says, in essentials, unity. In non-essentials, diversity. In all things, love. And what that means is, we all, at least in the way I see things, we all share a common foundation in what's essential. I hold that very loosely in my own particular way of understanding faith and religion. You don't have to call God by the same name. You don't have to believe the same things about God as I do. You don't have to believe in God altogether. What's essential is the way we love and care for and treat one another and seeing the humanity that we all share. The non-essentials are almost everything else. And so we practice things differently. We approach the way that we practice religion differently. But we still have so much to learn from one another. And so I think the way toward unity is to just remember that. And when you're engaging with someone different than you, which is anytime you're engaging with anyone, to be open to what they have to say, to not bring a defensive mindset about you having to defend your faith, but to hear what theirs is, because we're all constantly learning from one another when we're open to one another.
Much of what we're describing is what we hope to do here at Thaden, which is to be a place of discourse in the center of the country, and we know that our country has become increasingly polarized and divided, and many of us feel that very deeply, and it can feel really discouraging as well. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what happens when we leave this space, right? This safe, protected space that we've created. We go back to our communities, we go back to our families, and perhaps that sense of division or discouragement feels much more present than it might in this space here. How can we approach that conflict or tension?
I think one thing that we talk about in Buddhism is kosunrufu. It's this idea that if we can spread the values of the characteristics of the Buddha, like courage, wisdom, that if that can spread, that we can have a true world peace, where each individual respects the life of every individual around them. I think that that's hard to achieve though, but it starts at home. I saw something on Facebook, it said it was from a Buddhist monk, not sure if it was, but it said everyone wants to change the world, but no one wants to do the dishes. And I was reminded of that, like in my office it says clean up after yourself. I saw in the kitchen, clean up after yourself. You know, world peace, changing the world, we say that's part of human revolution starts with you. So your human revolution begins with how you can take your own one step forward every day. And if you can take your one step forward, the people around you will see that, and that will allow them to take one step forward. I think that happening on an individual level starts to create a mass change. And if you can continue to do that every day, you'll impact the people around you. So in Buddhism, we do talk about karma. And so the karma you share with your family can be some of the deepest and most impactful. You go home and you spend your lives with these people. And so if there's tension at home, and if there's tension with you, you can create tension with your family. If your parents are upset or grandma is upset and that makes you upset, there's a microcosm around you. And so we say faith equals daily life because Buddhism is really more of a philosophical practice. It's how are you going to act every day? And so if you can just take that one step forward in your life each day, that one small action, that creates change within the world around you. And that is something that I have such a firm faith in. So I think that is one thing that we all have to take into account. I sometimes feel overwhelmed with this idea of like, I have to create world peace myself, or how am I going to change this huge thing that is happening in the world, and how do I myself impact that? But it really just starts with one step each day. It doesn't have to be a big change that ends up really impacting those around you.
That was awesome. As I think about, how do we build these bridges and come together in cooperation, I can't help but think about the exemplar who we worship, Jesus Christ, who taught that one of the great commandments is to love one another. And I think if we can all find that love for one another, love really will solve so many of the ills of the divide that sometimes is polarizing. I also think of three things that we can do. One is serve. Two is come together like this among just to collaborate. And three is humanitarian work. And just real briefly on each of those, there are just so many amazing opportunities right here in the Bentonville community to serve. Our church, I know other churches do the same, partner with the pantries or partner with the Red Cross or other organizations. And we go in with this one common goal, and that's to help others. It's not to put one religion up versus another. It's to help the suffering, help the individual who needs help. And we've had some just extraordinary experiences, our church with other churches, and that's really been just an absolutely wonderful experience. As it relates to collaborating, I know there's been some really great things happening in the interfaith efforts right here in this area, which has really been exemplary, I think, to the broader region. There was a peace walk last year that was very successful. Some people here on this panel participated. I know Mayor Orman here in Bentonville is very involved in the National Day of Prayer, and that brought a lot of organizations of different faiths together. And then she had a luncheon with pastors in the area, again, bringing multiple faiths together, and that was really neat. And then as it relates to humanitarian, millions and millions and millions of dollars are donated, I know by my church, by other churches and religions, to help ease the suffering. And I think that's a way that we can come together. I know our church has partnered with Muslim Aid, with Israel Aid, with Catholic Relief Services, and other wonderful entities in the effort of relieving suffering.
I think this is all great suggestions and ideas. I think one thing we need to do is create spaces where people of the different poles of the polarization can come together for a common purpose without having to focus on their polarizations. One thing that I had in mind when starting this prayer group that I lead is that it would be welcoming to people across the political spectrum. And we have political conservatives, political liberals, everyone in between, and kind of non-political people. And it's all people who really love the traditional prayers that we've inherited and delight in doing them together. Even though probably if I talked to some of the people in the group, I would be appalled at their political positions, but we have to transcend that and find spaces where we can all be together and enjoy each other's presence.
I would agree 100% with that, because I think that the division that we see, and it's all too real, I think, in the last several years, it's felt that the country feels more divided, at least to me, than it has in my entire lifetime. But I think it's partly because we tend to paint one another with a broad brush, and we talk about the liberals or the conservatives as though they're the enemy. But when you put people together in a room, or you give everyone a hammer to build a house for a neighbor, or whatever it may be, there's not as much anger and vitriol. It's harder to, when you see the humanity in the person that has a different opinion than you, you're more apt to open your heart and your mind to their point of view. And once someone feels heard, even if you still do not agree with them, it just kind of brings the temperature down of the relationship so that you can have an actual relationship instead of just talking about one another as though we're categories.
I'll just share two quick, takeaway things that I would just suggest everyone to try to do in their own lives. And the first thing is everyone kind of already shared, there's so many different people from across the political spectrum. We all have so many different beliefs. I think we can all still focus on the things that we agree on. And so instead of like fighting over the things that, or instead of talking about the things that we disagree on, just focusing on the things that we like. And so someone can be a LeBron fan, someone can be a Steph Curry fan. Y'all hate each other's guts, but you can still play basketball together, right? And so you can still have a great time, play basketball, pat each other on the back, and walk away, even though you hate each other's guts. And it's possible, because I've seen it happen. I see it on the court every other day. So I know it's possible, especially amongst high schoolers. And so that's the first thing, You can have widely opposing views, but you can still find something in common, and just focus on that. And then the second thing is just a quote that, a saying of our Prophet Muhammad, where he says, "Yarhamu man fil ard, yarhamkum man fis sama." If you show mercy to those on earth, and you'll be shown mercy in heaven. And I think that's just, regardless of what faith you believe in, that's a really general guiding principle that we can all live by. So if we just show mercy to the people around us, then we'll know we'll be taken care of.
Yeah, I kind of echoing what you said. I think a great challenge of our day right now in this social media age is being able to see each other as human beings and not political abstractions. And part of being able to do that is to also be able to see yourself as a human being. And the human experience is a paradox. The human condition is that we have the capacity for both good and evil. And when you really see that in yourself and see how you can get swept away in things or fall into bad habits, or you can be mean or you can be careless, then you have more patience and tolerance when you see those things in others. And I think for me personally, as like a young revolutionary, I was always like, how can I change the world? How can I change people? And now in my 40s, I'm more like, oh, it's actually all about changing myself, which goes back to what you were saying. And the fact is that life is hard. I think that's the first thing we have to really pay attention to and give sacred attention to. The Buddha said, life is suffering, right? I mean, that's just the fundamental thing. But that your soul has the capacity to handle it. There's a quote in the Baha'i faith that says, the soul is created to bear and endure. We're created to handle life and to learn and grow. That's how the soul works. We face challenges, and that's what pushes us to learn and to grow. What was I talking about? I wanted to bring it around to something. Oh, so this is it. So the point is, in how do we get out of this room and go out into the world? Yeah, we're going to see problems in the world or have difficult people in our lives, but I think that most spiritual teachings remind us to go back to yourself and just worry about yourself and how are you cultivating your own virtues and becoming the best of who you can be as a person in this world.
I think I'm wondering if I could just jump in with a final question here before we head out to do some reflecting on this for lunch. As we come back to ourselves, I'd love to invite you all to think about your high school self. We have a lot of young people in the room who are learning and growing. So what is the piece of advice or the thing you needed to hear when you were in this audience at this age? This is a hard question.
This is not just for religion, but this is for everything. I wrote a letter to my son who's about to turn 17. You'll be going to college in a few years. And my only thing I would say is just be open to learning every day and take advantage of all the opportunities you get. So I was telling Kyla backstage that I wish at 17, 18 I got this opportunity to get exposed to so many of the world religions. So you're already way ahead of all of us on this panel, I would say. And so, you know, you can do way better than all of us and make a better place, Earth a better place going forward for the future generations. So go do it.
I think the number one thing I would tell my high school self is to trust myself more. Especially at that time in my life, I was often trying to impress people or fit in with people by not listening to my own inner voice, which I would say at times is what I would also call the spirit. And I think just learn to trust yourself. It's not always easy, but it's the greatest lesson I think that anybody can learn, is to trust themselves, and then that helps you learn to trust and value other people because they also have the same value that you do.
Well, Ms. Carpenter talked about mirrors and windows, and one thing I would say is make sure that your window is nice and clean so it doesn't act like a mirror. Because, you know, you look into a mirror, the window, sometimes you see yourself and not really see the person who's on the other side.
I would say Nichiren Daishonin started our Buddhist practice, and he told these three brothers, what better story is there than your own? And so just to remember, like, your life is infinitely precious. Like, you are amazing because you are here, and like, full stop, and you don't have to do anything else for that to be true. So I think just to remember, like, you guys are living like amazing parts of your life. I think people would tell me when I was younger, like, oh, you know, you're gonna live your life later, or, you know, things in the future will matter more, and that's not necessarily true. You're experiencing things that are gonna be the foundation of your life going forward, and so just remember, you're gonna have this amazing story, but like any good story, there are ups and downs, and the hero has to, you know, climb the summit and then come back down the other side. But that you have everything that you need inside of you to manage and handle all of that, and still have a good life. An amazing life, amazing story.
I think everyone sitting with me up here on the panel will agree that although high school are some of the most difficult years of your life, they're also some of the most memorable. And so, you know, regardless, I know there's so much pressure on many of you guys, whether it's, you know, ACTs, whether it's AP exams, getting into the best colleges. It's really difficult to just sometimes wind down and just really enjoy these years. But these will be some of the best years of your life. And so really enjoy them, and, you know, focus on the positives that you can and make the most of it, and just, you know, let go of a lot of the negativity. There's a lot of pressure that goes around. One of my favorite quotes is, we buy things we don't like with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. And I think that sums up high school and even college in a nutshell. And so just, you know, really thinking about that and just focusing on the relationships that you have and the passions that you have, and everything else will, you know, set into stone. You know, college, it'll come and go, whether you decide to go to college or you want to pursue your own education or business or whatever. Life works out at the end of the day, and so just really enjoy the moment and, you know, worry about some of the other things tomorrow.
I love everything that everybody has said, and I wish that I was back in high school and would talk to you going into those last couple of years. This is what I would say, that life has a purpose far greater than what most people think. That your life is far more significant and has a much greater purpose than how many likes you get, how many social media friends you have. That truly you are a son or a daughter of God, that has divine potential to ultimately return to the presence of God with your families and make decisions that will draw you closer to your true purpose in life, not just the life that the world would say that you need to have.
Yeah, I'll follow up on that. That idea of following forward to your true purpose, and this idea of like, just tend to your spiritual health as much as your physical. I mean, you know, if you left here and ate like a pound of French fries, you would feel a certain way. You might not feel so great afterwards. And it's the same thing in the realm of like your psychological or emotional and spiritual health. You have to pay attention to what you're feeding it. And since you guys are in the age of like, you have a phone in your hand that can access anything, like the best stuff and the absolute worst stuff, just be careful with yourself and really get to know yourself. It's all about self-knowledge and what feeds your soul and what really cuts yourself off from like just feeling good about life and good in the world. Because it's easy to fall into those rabbit holes that cut us off from our true self. And there's a lot of social forces around y'all right now. It's more increased than when we were all young. It's a really wild time. So it's all about your own self-knowledge and knowing how to protect yourself, and then like follow what feels good and feed your soul what makes you feel like nourished and healthy and like, yeah, I'm like got a place in this world, feels good.
And on the note of nourishment, we'll be heading out to lunch soon, but I'm hoping you can join us in thanking our panelists for all their thoughts today. I know that I'm leaving feeling more humbled and more curious, and we could talk all day and still not resolve or finish, and I hope you are feeling somewhat similar and that you're curious and have more to say and more to ask. So thank you all so much for joining us.